Hi everyone, welcome to Watercolor the Art Impressions Way. I'm Bonnie Krebs, and today I'm going to show you how to stamp and watercolor this image. This is one of our newest releases. It's our Southwest image, and it has included several of these really cute cactus plants, a new container, and these rocks down here, which I also love. So you're going to love this set, especially those of you who live in the Southwest, in the desert area. It's so beautiful there, and you're going to love using these stamps. So let's get started. I'm using watercolor paper, Strathmore, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to use this container. So we're going to start with the container, and I'm just going to stamp it twice here. So I'm going to use the sepia, stamp it first in the sepia, and I'm just inking the back here. Stamping it on the watercolor paper. And then I'm going to ink it again with the blue. This is the number 86. So we can do the container in a couple of different ways. We can do it so that it's white, which is why we stamp it in the blue. And then we can also do it in a terracotta or a color. So in order to do that, we first need to stamp it in the sepia. We're going to add the water to it and pull the color out, just like we do on every other project. Just drag this color. Make sure to leave the center open. I know I say that in all the videos, but it's so important to do that, especially with these containers that are rounded. We want to keep this area open. That's how the container looks round. The minute that you color it all in solid, it's flat. Okay, so we've got the basic color outside of the lines. Now we're going to add color to it. And what I've done is on my palette, I've added two colors. So these are sort of terracotta colors. This one actually is terracotta, number 88. And then I've also added a number 6 brown. So I've just scribbled that onto my palette, and I'm going to dip my brush, and I'm going to take some of this color. It doesn't matter which one you start with, and start on the side. Put the color down on the side. That's going to be the darkest area. That's the farthest away from you. And so you want to make sure that that stays really, really dark. Just put that color on and then sort of drag it over to the center. This is a process, so it's going to take a few applications to really get the color on, but that's okay. Tip my brush again, pull a little more color off, and just really focus on keeping the dark color to the sides, and then just sort of drag it over to the center. Take your time. Make sure to leave that center highlight open. Let's pick up another of this other color. This is the brown. And see, I'm going to make sure that I keep that really dark on the side. Just keep adding the color. You really can't get the sides too dark. You can just keep adding and adding and adding the color. Okay? And then do a little embellishment. I always think about terracotta, southwestern design, something with angles. So we could take some of this blue. We could make a little embellishment across the center. If you're doing a line, make sure it's a bended line, not a straight line. And then maybe just something like this. Don't get too worried about it. Don't spend too much time agonizing over making sure your lines are straight. It's okay. So let's go on now to the next one. And this is the one that we're going to keep white. So we want to make sure that we pinch the brush off and get all the color out. And begin to drag this color out now. So even though things are white, they're still going to have color. This is the shadow that we're seeing on the white pot. So that's why we start with the blue. So we're just going to keep dragging this color over. Make sure that the color is concentrated on the side. That's so important. Pull that over to the center. You could add a little more color to it also on the edge. And let's do a little embellishment on this one too. So maybe let's do something more like this. And just drag it over and across. You can also use your fine point if you want to make that detail really sharp. Just come all the way around. This doesn't have to be exact at all. You can use your fine point and do more lines like this as well. You could go back over this one too. And there you have two different options. So let's go on from here. And I've got just a little pot stamped on here. So this is stamped in the blue. So we're going to keep the pot white. So let's go on and start with the cactus now. So I'm going to ink this one. This is a prickly pear cactus. So we're just going to stamp it in the container, like so. Dip your brush in water and just begin to pull the color out of the lines. Think about the sun being directly overhead. And so you want to leave those white areas. Don't bring the color all the way to the top. If you leave some white areas, it shows texture in the plant and it looks sort of bumpy and you know, the surface doesn't look smooth. But when you try to color everything in solid, it just has that smooth, unnatural look. This sort of makes the light look like it's bouncing off the plant. So just take your time and do this. Just kind of pull all the color around. You can add a little more color to it if you want to. This is the number 15 green. I used the 72 to ink it, and you can add a little more green to it. Keep the color concentrated on the bottom. See the tops of the plant? You want that to be the lightest. Add a little more down in here. You could come back in now with your fine point, and if you really want these little pricklies to show, you can come back here and darken them. This just adds so much dimension. Don't be afraid to come back in the lines if you want those lines to be really sharp. Don't be afraid to come back in and use your fine point. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Let's ink this little guy. And we're going to ink this one on a repeat. So we want to ink this at least 2 or 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. And dip the brush and just stroke this color. And you can see you get the dark in the foreground and the light in the back. Super important. Okay, let's do this little guy now. We're just going to ink this whole thing. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to stamp it on a repeat. So let's put a couple out here. Let's ink it again. And we'll stamp a few up here. And then add water. This is all the same technique. This is so easy to do. And you know, once you get this idea of inking and stamping several times, it just translates into all the different projects. So it's just the easiest thing. Really, the hardest thing is figuring out where you're going to place things. And really, once you've stamped these things a few times, you will have that down as well. Okay, I'm going to take some of this sepia now. I'm going to put a little bit on my palette. And I'm just going to put a little of this color inside. Just right in here, and I'm going to take a little bit and drag it outside. It's okay to mix it in with the blue. Perfectly fine to do that. Let's add the rocks now. So rocks are something earthy from outside, so we want to use the sepia. And we're just going to ink that one time and stamp it right next to the pot. These are really versatile. You can put these inside your container. You can put them next to each other. They're just going to work really good with any of your projects. And make sure, just like we did with the cactus, think about the light always coming straight down. It's always 12 o'clock. So you want to make sure that that highlight on the top, that's your lightest area. And as you go down below, this gets darker and darker under here. It's the easiest way. You can have the light coming from either direction, but I just feel like for people who are not watercolor artists, people who maybe don't do this every day, it's just easier to think about the light coming straight down. Okay, let's add an accent now. And so we're going to come back to this little grass. This grass is probably in 90% of the projects, but it's from the foliage set. So you go back to the foliage set always over and over again. So we're going to go back to this little tiny grass, and I'm just going to ink it with the sepia because this is kind of dry, arid, and so we don't want a lot of green grass, but there is a lot of this dried foliage and sort of grassy looking stuff. So I'm putting a little bit into the container and a little bit out. Add some water to it. Doesn't take a lot. And pull this color up and out. You can take some of this color out of the side and drag it out if you like to have that little shadow behind. It just adds a lot of dimension to do that. Just drag this color out. The more you blend, the softer it's going to get. So if you really like that soft look, you can just keep blending and blending and blending. Let's add a little detail back to this. I just love using these fine tips. That's what I love about Marby. Any of your water-based markers are going to work, but I just really love these fine tips. Look how tiny that is. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but they're so tiny and they really stay wet. Sign your name, date. Now we're at 2016. And there you have it. Beautiful Southwest design and ready to frame. Thanks for watching.